Friends, if you want to watch super hit movie, The Shawshank Redemption in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, friends. In today's video, the movie we're going to talk about is called The Shawshank Redemption. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you, I'm also going to give you all the information on which platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production, filming, post-production, budget, box office collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film, storyline, star cast actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you, friends, to watch this video till the end, and so let's start the video. The Shawshank Redemption is a 1994 American prison drama film written and directed by Frank Darabont, based on the 1982 Stephen King novella Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption. The film tells the story of banker Andy Dufresne, Tim Robbins, who is sentenced to life in Shawshank State Penitentiary for the murders of his wife and her lover, despite his claims of innocence. Over the following 2 decades, he befriends a fellow prisoner, contraband smuggler Ellis "Red" Redding, Morgan Freeman, and becomes instrumental in a money laundering operation led by the prison warden Samuel Norton, Bob Gunton. William Sadler, Clancy Brown, Gil Bellows, and James Whitmore appear in supporting roles. Darabont purchased the film rights to King's story in 1987, but development did not begin until 5 years later, when he wrote the script over 8 weeks. 2 weeks after submitting his script to Castle Rock Entertainment, Darabont secured a $25 million budget to produce The Shawshank Redemption, which started pre-production in January 1993. While the film is set in Maine, principal photography took place from June to August 1993, almost entirely in Mansfield, Ohio, with the Ohio State Reformatory serving as the eponymous penitentiary. The project attracted many stars for the role of Andy, including Tom Hanks, Tom Cruise, and Kevin Costner. Thomas Newman provided the film's score. While The Shawshank Redemption received critical acclaim upon its release, particularly for its story and the performances of Robbins and Freeman, it was a box office disappointment, earning only $16 million during its initial theatrical run. Many factors were attributed to its failure at the time, including competition from the films Pulp Fiction and Forrest Gump, the general unpopularity of prison films, its lack of female characters, and even the title, which was considered confusing for audiences. It went on to receive multiple award nominations, including 7 Academy Award nominations and a theatrical re-release that, combined with international takings, increased the film's box office gross to $73.3 million. Over 320,000 VHS rental copies were shipped throughout the United States, and on the strength of its award nominations and word of mouth, it became the top video rental of 1995. The broadcast rights were acquired following the purchase of Castle Rock Entertainment by Turner Broadcasting System, and it was shown regularly on the TNT network starting in 1997, further increasing its popularity. Decades after release, the film is still broadcast regularly and is popular in several countries, with audience members and celebrities citing it as a source of inspiration or naming it a favorite in various surveys, leading to its recognition as one of the best-loved films by audiences. In 2015, the United States Library of Congress selected the film for preservation in the National Film Registry, finding it culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Plot. In 1947, Portland, Maine, banker Andy Dufresne arrives at Shawshank State Prison to serve 2 consecutive life sentences for murdering his wife and her lover. He is befriended by Ellis Boyd "Red" Redding, a contraband smuggler serving a life sentence, who procures for him a rock hammer and a large poster of Rita Hayworth. Assigned to work in the prison laundry, Andy is frequently raped by the Sisters gang led by Boggs Diamond. In 1949, Andy overhears the captain of the guards, Byron Hadley, complaining about being taxed on an inheritance and offers to help him shelter the money legally. After the sisters beat Andy to near death, Hadley cripples Boggs, who is subsequently transferred to a minimum security hospital. Andy is not attacked again. Warden Samuel Norton assigns Andy to the prison's decrepit library, ostensibly to assist elderly inmate Brooks Hatlin, but in reality, to leverage Andy's financial expertise for managing the finances of the warden and other prison staff. Andy also starts writing weekly letters to the state legislature requesting funding to improve the library. Brooks is paroled in 1954 after serving 50 years, but cannot adjust to the outside world and eventually hangs himself. After years of Andy's ceaseless letters, the legislature sends a library donation that includes a recording of the marriage of Figaro. Andy plays an excerpt over the public address system, experiencing a moment of personal freedom before he is punished with solitary confinement. After his release from solitary, Andy explains to a dismissive Red that hope is what gets him through his sentence. In 1963, Norton begins exploiting prison labor for public works, profiting by undercutting skilled labor costs and receiving bribes. Andy launders the money using the alias Randall Stevens. In 1965, Andy and Red befriend Tommy Williams, a young inmate convicted of burglary. Andy helps Tommy pass his general educational development exam, and Tommy later reveals that his cellmate at another prison confessed to committing the murders for which Andy was convicted. When Andy informs Norton, the warden refuses to act. Although Andy promises to keep the money laundering a secret, Norton has Hadley kill Tommy under the guise of an escape attempt and sends Andy to solitary confinement. Norton then threatens to destroy the library, strip Andy of guard protection, and transfer him to harsher conditions if he refuses to continue with his scheme. A disheveled Andy is released from solitary confinement after 2 months. He tells a skeptical Red that he dreams of living in Zihuatanejo, a Mexican town on the Pacific coast where he can start anew. He asks Red to promise, once he is released, to travel to a specific hayfield near Buxton and recover a package that Andy buried there. Red worries that Andy is suicidal, especially after learning that he asked a fellow inmate for a rope. At the next day's roll call, the guards find Andy's cell empty. An irate Norton throws a rock at a poster of Raquel Welch hanging on the cell wall, revealing a tunnel that Andy had dug with his rock hammer over 19 years. The previous night, Andy escaped through the tunnel and prison sewage pipe, taking with him Norton's suit, shoes, and the ledger containing evidence of the money laundering and corruption at Shawshank. While guards search for him, Andy poses as Randall Stevens and withdraws over $370,000 of the laundered money from various banks before mailing the ledger to a local newspaper. State police arrive at Shawshank and take Hadley into custody, while Norton commits suicide to avoid arrest. The following year, Red is paroled after serving 40 years, but struggles to adapt to life outside prison and fears that he never will. Remembering his promise to Andy, he visits Buxton and finds a cache containing money and a letter inviting him to come to Zihuatanejo. Red violates his parole by traveling to Mexico, admitting that he finally feels hope. He finds Andy on a beach and the reunited friends happily embrace. Cast Tim Robbins as Andy Dufresne, a banker sentenced to life in prison in 1947 for the murder of his wife and her lover. Morgan Freeman as Ellis Boyd, Red Redding, a prison contraband smuggler who befriends Andy. Bob Gunton as Samuel Norton, the pious and cruel warden of Shawshank Penitentiary. William Sadler as Haywood, a member of Red's gang of long-serving convicts. Clancy Brown as Byron Hadley, the brutal captain of the prison guards. Gil Bellows as Tommy Williams, a young convict imprisoned for burglary in 1965. James Whitmore as Brooks Hatlin, the elderly prison librarian imprisoned at Shawshank for over 5 decades. The cast also includes Mark Rolston as Boggs Diamond, the head of the Sisters gang and a prison rapist, Jeffrey DeMunn as the prosecuting attorney in Dufresne's trial, Alfonso Freeman as Fresh Fish Khan, Ned Bellamy and Don McManus as, respectively, prison guards Youngblood and Wiley, and Dion Anderson as Head Bull Haig. Renee Blaine portrays Andy's wife, and Scott Mann portrays her golf instructor lover Glenn Quinton. Frank Medrano plays Fat Ass, one of Andy's fellow new inmates who is beaten to death by Hadley. and Bill Bolender plays Elmo Blatch, a convict who is implied to be responsible for the crimes for which Andy is convicted. James Kosicki and Claire Slemmer portray the Maine National Bank manager and a teller, respectively. Analysis. The film has been interpreted as being grounded in Christian mysticism. Andy is offered as a messianic Christ-like figure, with Red describing him early in the film as having an aura that engulfs and protects him from Shawshank. The scene in which Andy and several inmates tar the prison roof can be seen as a recreation of the Last Supper, with Andy obtaining beer wine for the 12 inmates' disciples, as Freeman describes them as the lords of all creation, invoking Jesus' blessing. Director Frank Darabont responded that this was not his deliberate intention, but he wanted people to find their own meaning in the film. The discovery of the marriage of Figaro record is described in the screenplay as akin to finding the Holy Grail, bringing the prisoners to a halt and causing the sick to rise up in their beds. Early in the film, Warden Norton quotes Jesus Christ to describe himself to Andy, saying, "I am the light of the world," declaring himself Andy's savior. But this description can also reference Lucifer, the bearer of light. Indeed, the warden does not enforce the general rule of law, but chooses to enforce his own rules and punishments as he sees fit, becoming a law unto himself, like the behavior of Satan. The warden has also been compared to former United States President Richard Nixon. Norton's appearance and public addresses can be seen to mirror Nixon's. Similarly, Norton projects an image of a holy man, speaking down sanctimoniously to the servile masses while running corrupt scams like those of which Nixon was accused. Zihuatanejo has been interpreted as an analog for heaven or paradise. In the film, Andy describes it as a place with no memory, offering absolution from his sins by forgetting about them or allowing them to be washed away by the Pacific Ocean, whose name means peaceful. The possibility of escaping to Zihuatanejo is only raised after Andy admits that he feels responsible for his wife's death. Similarly, Red's freedom is only earned once he accepts he cannot save himself or atone for his sins. Freeman has described Red's story as one of salvation, as he is not innocent of his crimes, unlike Andy, who finds redemption. While some Christian viewers interpret Zihuatanejo as heaven, film critic Mark Kermode wrote that it can also be interpreted as a Nietzschean form of guiltlessness, achieved outside traditional notions of good and evil, where the amnesia offered is the destruction rather than forgiveness of sin, meaning Andy's aim is secular and atheistic. Just as Andy can be interpreted as a Christ-like figure, he can be seen as a Zarathustra-like prophet offering escape through education and the experience of freedom. Film critic Roger Ebert argued that The Shawshank Redemption is an allegory for maintaining one's feeling of self-worth when placed in a hopeless position. Andy's integrity is an important theme in the storyline, especially in prison where integrity is lacking. Robbins himself believes that the concept of Zihuatanejo resonates with audiences because it represents a form of escape that can be achieved after surviving for many years within whatever jail someone finds themselves in, whether a bad relationship, job, or environment. Robbins said that it is important that such a place exists for us. Isaac M. Morehouse suggests that the film provides a great illustration of how characters can be free, even in prison or imprisoned, even in freedom based on their outlooks on life. Philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre described freedom as an ongoing project that requires attention and resilience, without which a person begins to be defined by others or institutions, mirroring Red's belief that inmates become dependent on the prison to define their lives. Andy displays resilience through rebellion by playing music over the prison loudspeaker and refusing to continue with the money laundering scam. Many elements can be considered as tributes to the power of cinema. In the prison theater, the inmates watched the film Gilda, 1946, but this scene was originally intended to feature The Lost Weekend, 1945. The interchangeability of the films used in the prison theater suggests that it is the cinematic experience and not the subject that is key to the scene, allowing the men to escape the reality of their situation. Immediately following this scene, Andy is assaulted by the sisters in the projector room and uses a film reel to help fight them off. At the end of the film, Andy passes through a hole in his cell, hidden by a movie poster, to escape both his cell and ultimately Shawshank. Andy and Red's relationship has been described as a non-sexual story between two men that few other films offer, as the friendship is not built on conducting a caper, car chases, or developing a relationship with women. Philosopher Alexander Hooke argued that Andy and Red's true freedom is their friendship, being able to share joy and humor with each other. Production. Development. Frank Darabont first collaborated with author Stephen King in 1983 on the short film adaptation of The Woman in the Room, buying the rights from him for $1. A dollar deal that King used to help new directors build a resume by adapting his short stories. After receiving his first screenwriting credit in 1987 for A Nightmare on Elm Street 3: Dream Warriors, Darabont returned to King with $5,000 to purchase the rights to adapt Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption, a 96-page novella from King's 1982 collection Different Seasons, written to explore genres other than the horror stories for which he was commonly known. Although King did not understand how the story, largely focused on Red contemplating his fellow prisoner Andy, could be turned into a feature film, Darabont believed it was obvious. King never cashed the $5,000 check from Darabont. He later framed it and returned it to Darabont, accompanied by a note which read, "In case you ever need bail money, love, Steve." 5 years later, Darabont wrote the script over an 8-week period. He expanded on elements of King's story. Brooks, who in the novella is a minor character who dies in a retirement home, became a tragic character who eventually hanged himself. Tommy, who in the novella trades his evidence exonerating Andy for transfer to a nicer prison, in the screenplay is murdered on the orders of Warden Norton, who is a composite of several Warden characters in King's story. Darabont opted to create a single Warden character to serve as the primary antagonist. Among his inspirations, Darabont listed the works of director Frank Capra, including Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, 1939, and It's a Wonderful Life, 1946, describing them as tall tales. Darabont likened The Shawshank Redemption to a tall tale more than a prison movie. He also cited Goodfellas, 1990, as an inspiration on the use of dialogue to illustrate the passage of time in the script, and the prison drama Birdman of Alcatraz, 1962, directed by John Frankenheimer. While later scouting filming locations, Darabont happened upon Frankenheimer, who was scouting for his own prison set project, Against the Wall. Darabont recalled that Frankenheimer took time out from his scouting to provide Darabont with encouragement and advice. At the time, prison-based films were not considered likely box office successes, but Darabont's script was read by then Castle Rock Entertainment producer Liz Glotzer, whose interest in prison stories and reaction to the script led her to threaten to quit if Castle Rock Entertainment did not produce The Shawshank Redemption. Director and Castle Rock Entertainment co-founder Rob Reiner also liked the script. He offered Darabont between $2.4 million and $3 million to allow him to direct it himself. Reiner, who had previously adapted King's 1982 novella The Body into the 1986 film, Stand By Me, planned to cast Tom Cruise as Andy and Harrison Ford as Red. Castle Rock Entertainment offered to finance any other film Darabont wanted to develop. Darabont seriously considered the offer, citing growing up poor in Los Angeles, believing it would elevate his standing in the industry, and that Castle Rock Entertainment could have contractually fired him and given the film to Reiner anyway. But he chose to remain the director, saying in a 2014 Variety interview, "You can continue to defer your dreams in exchange for money and, die without ever having done the thing you set out to do." Reiner served as Darabont's mentor on the project instead. Within 2 weeks of showing the script to Castle Rock Entertainment, Darabont had a $25 million budget to make his film, taking a $750,000 screenwriting and directing salary plus a percentage of the net profits. And pre-production began in January 1993. Casting Morgan Freeman was cast at the suggestion of producer Liz Glotzer, who ignored the novella's character description of a white Irishman nicknamed Red. Freeman's character alludes to the choice when queried by Andy on why he is called Red, replying, "Maybe it's because I'm Irish." Freeman opted not to research his role, saying, "Acting the part of someone who's incarcerated doesn't require any specific knowledge of incarceration because men don't change. Once you're in that situation, you just toe whatever line you have to toe." Darabont was already aware of Freeman from his minor role in another prison drama, Brubaker, 1980, while Tim Robbins had been excited to work alongside Freeman, having grown up watching him in the Electric Company children's television show. Darabont looked initially at some of his favorite actors, such as Gene Hackman and Robert Duvall, for the role of Andy Dufresne, but they were unavailable. 40. Clint Eastwood and Paul Newman were also considered. Tom Cruise, Tom Hanks, and Kevin Costner were offered, and passed on the role Hanks due to his starring role in Forrest Gump, and Costner because he had the lead in Waterworld. Johnny Depp, Nicolas Cage, and Charlie Sheen were also considered for the role at different stages. Cruise attended table readings of the script, but declined to work for the inexperienced Darabont. Darabont said he cast Robbins after seeing his performance in the 1990 psychological horror Jacob's Ladder. When Robbins was cast, he insisted that Darabont use experienced cinematographer Roger Deakins, who had worked with him on the Hudsucker Proxy. To prepare for the role, Robbins observed caged animals at a zoo, spent an afternoon in solitary confinement, spoke with prisoners and guards, and had his arms and legs shackled for a few hours. Cast initially as young convict Tommy, Brad Pitt dropped out following his success in Thelma and Louise, and the role went to a debuting Gil Bellows. James Gandolfini passed on portraying prison rapist Boggs Bob Gunton was filming Demolition Man 1993 when he went to audition for the role of Warden Norton. To convince the studio that Gunton was right for the part, Darabont and producer Nicky Marvin arranged for him to record a screen test on a day off from Demolition Man. They had a wig made for him, as his head was shaved for his Demolition Man role. Gunton wanted to portray Norton with hair, as this could then be grayed to convey his on-screen aging as the film progressed. Gunton performed his screen test with Robbins, which was filmed by Deakins. After being confirmed for the role, he used the wig in the film's early scenes until his hair regrew. Gunton said that Marvin and Darabont saw that he understood the character, which went in his favor, as did the fact his height was similar to Robbins, allowing Andy to believably use the warden's suit. Portraying the head guard Byron Hadley, Clancy Brown was given the opportunity to speak with former guards by the production's liaison officer but declined, believing it would not be a good thing to say that his brutal character was in any way inspired by Ohio State correctional officers. William Sadler, who portrays Haywood, said that Darabont had approached him in 1989 on the set of the Tales from the Crypt television series, where he was a writer, about starring in the adaptation he was intending to make. Freeman's son Alfonso has a cameo as a young Red in mugshot photos and as a prisoner shouting "fresh fish" as Andy arrives at Shawshank. Among the extras used in the film were the former warden and former inmates of the reformatory and active guards from a nearby incarceration facility. The novella's original title attracted several people to audition for the non-existent role of Rita Hayworth, including a man in drag clothing. Filming on a $25 million budget, principal photography took place over 3 months between June and August 1993. Filming regularly required up to 18-hour workdays, 6 days a week. Freeman described filming as tense, saying, "Most of the time, the tension was between the cast and director. I remember having a bad moment with the director, had a few of those." Freeman referred to Darabont's requiring multiple takes of scenes, which he considered had no discernible differences. For example, the scene where Andy first approaches Red to procure a rock hammer took 9 hours to film, and featured Freeman throwing and catching a baseball with another inmate throughout it. The number of takes that were shot resulted in Freeman turning up to filming the following day with his arm in a sling. Freeman sometimes simply refused to do the additional takes. Robbins said that the long days were difficult. Darabont felt that making the film taught him a lot. A director really needs to have an internal barometer to measure what any given actor needs. He found his most frequent struggles were with Deakins. Darabont favored more scenic shots, while Deakins felt that not showing the outside of the prison added a sense of claustrophobia, and it meant that when a wide scenic shot was used, it had more impact. Marvin spent 5 months scouting prisons across the United States and Canada, looking for a site that had a timeless aesthetic and was completely abandoned, hoping to avoid the complexity of filming the required footage for hours each day in an active prison with the security difficulties that would entail. Marvin eventually chose the Ohio State Reformatory in Mansfield, Ohio, to serve as the fictional Shawshank State Penitentiary in Maine, citing its Gothic-style stone and brick buildings. The facility had been shuttered 3 years earlier in 1990 due to inhumane living conditions. The 15-acre reformatory, housing its own power plant and farm, was partially torn down shortly after filming was completed, leaving the main administration building and 2 cell blocks. Several of the interior shots of the specialized prison facilities, such as the admittance rooms and the warden's office, were shot in the reformatory. The interior of the boarding room used by Brooks and Red was in the administration building. Exterior shots of the boarding house were taken elsewhere. Internal scenes in the prison cell blocks were filmed on a soundstage built inside a nearby shuttered Westinghouse electric factory. Since Darabont wanted the inmates' cells to face each other, almost all the cell block scenes were shot on a purpose-built set housed in the Westinghouse factory, except for the scene featuring Elmo Blatch's admission of guilt for the crimes for which Andy was convicted. It was filmed in one of the actual prison's more confined cells. Scenes were also filmed in Mansfield, as well as neighboring Ashland, Ohio. The oak tree under which Andy buries his letter to Red was located near Malabar Farm State Park in Lucas, Ohio. It was destroyed by winds in 2016. Just as a prison in Ohio stood in for a fictional one in Maine, the beach scene showing Andy and Red's reunion in Zihuatanejo, Mexico, was actually shot in the Caribbean on the island of St. Croix, one of the U.S. Virgin Islands. The beach at Zihuatanejo is the Sandy Point National Wildlife Refuge, a protected area for leatherback sea turtles. Scenes shot in Upper Sandusky included the prison woodshop scene where Red and his fellow inmates hear the marriage of Figaro. The woodshop is now called the Shawshank Woodshop, and the opening court scene, which was shot at the Wyandotte County Courthouse. Other shooting locations included Pew Cabin in Malabar Farm State Park, where Andy sits outside as his wife engages in an affair. Butler, Ohio stood in for Buxton. Maine and the Bisman building in Mansfield served as the halfway house where Brooks stayed following his release. For the scene depicting Andy's escape from the prison, Darabont envisioned Andy using his miniature rock hammer to break into the sewage pipe, but he determined that this was not realistic. He opted instead to use a large piece of rock. While the film portrays the iconic scene of Andy escaping to freedom through a sewer pipe described as a river of shit, Robbins crawls through a mixture of water, chocolate syrup, and sawdust. The stream into which Robbins emerges was actually certified toxic by a chemist, according to production designer Terrence Marsh. The production team dammed the stream to make it deeper and used chlorination to partially decontaminate it. Of the scene, Robbins said, "When you're doing a film, you want to be a good soldier. You don't want to be the one who gets in the way. So you will do things as an actor that are compromising to your physical health and safety." The scene was intended to be much longer and more dramatic, detailing Andy's escape across a field and onto a train, but with only a single night available to film the sequence, it was shortened to showing Andy standing triumphant in the water. Of his own work, Deakins considers the scene to be one of his least favorite, saying that he overlit it. In response, Darabont disagreed with Deakins' self-assessment. He said that the time and precision taken by Deakins and their limited filming schedule meant he had to be precise in what he could film and how. In a 2019 interview, he stated that he regretted that this meant he could not film a close-up of Robbins's face as he climbed down out of the hole from his cell. As for the scene where Andy rebelliously plays music over the prison announcement system, it was Robbins' idea for Andy to turn the music up and not shut it off. While in the finished film, the inmates watch Rita Hayworth in Gilda, 1946. They were originally intended to be watching Billy Wilder's The Lost Weekend, 1945, a film about the dangers of alcohol. As the footage was too costly to procure from Paramount Pictures, producer Nicky Marvin approached the Shawshank Redemption's domestic distribution rights holder Columbia Pictures, which offered a list of lower-priced titles, one of which was Gilda. As filming took place mainly in and around the prison, scenes were often shot in near chronological order, respective of the different eras depicted throughout the story. This aided the actors' performances as their real-life relationships evolved alongside those of their respective characters. Darabont commented that the scene in which Andy tells Red about his dreams of going to Mexico was one of the last filmed and one that he most revisited in recollecting on the film's production. He praised Robbins and Freeman for completing the scene in only a few takes. Post-production. The final cut of the theatrically released film runs for 142 minutes, and was dedicated to the memory of Alan Green, Darabont's former agent, who died during filming from AIDS. The film's first edit ran for nearly 2.5 hours, which Glotzer considered long, and several scenes were cut, including a longer sequence of Red adjusting to life after incarceration. Darabont said that in test screenings, the audience seemed to be getting impatient with the scene, as they were already convinced that Red would not make it. Another scene cut for time showed a prison guard investigating Andy's escape tunnel. This was thought to slow down the action. The film originally had a cold open that played out Andy's crime, with his trial playing throughout the opening credits, but these scenes were edited together to create a more punchy opening. One scripted scene, which Darabont described as his best work, was left unfilmed because of the shooting schedule. In the scene, a dreaming Red is sucked into the poster of Rita Hayworth to find himself alone and insignificant on the Pacific shore, saying, "I am terrified. There is no way home." Darabont said that he regretted being unable to capture the scene. In Darabont's original vision for the end of the film, Red is seen riding a bus towards the Mexican border, leaving his fate ambiguous. Glotzer insisted on including the scene of Red and Andy reuniting in Zihuatanejo. She said Darabont felt this was a commercial, sappy ending, but Glotzer wanted the audience to see them together. Castle Rock agreed to finance filming for the scene without requiring its inclusion, guaranteeing Darabont the final decision. The scene originally featured a longer reunion in which Andy and Red recited dialogue from their first meeting, but Darabont said it had a golly gee ain't we cute quality and excised it. The beach reunion was test audience's favorite scene. Both Freeman and Robbins felt it provided the necessary closure. Darabont agreed to include the scene after seeing the test audience reaction, saying, "I think it's a magical and uplifting place for our characters to arrive at the end of their long saga." Music. Main article, The Shawshank Redemption. The film's score was composed by Thomas Newman. He felt that it already elicited such strong emotions without music that he found it difficult to compose one that would elevate scenes without distracting from them. The piece, Shawshank Redemption, plays during Andy's escape from Shawshank and originally had a 3-note motif, but Darabont felt it had too much of a triumphal flourish and asked that it be toned down to a single-note motif. So Was Red, played following Red's release from prison and leading to his discovery of Andy's cache, became one of Newman's favorite pieces. The piece was initially written for a solo oboe until Newman reluctantly agreed to add harmonica, a reference to the harmonica Red receives from Andy, to continue his message of hope. According to Darabont, harmonica player Tommy Morgan casually delivered something dead-on perfect on the first take. And this is heard in the finished film. Newman's score was so successful that excerpts from it were used in movie trailers for years afterwards. Release. Theatrical. Leading up to its release, the film was test-screened with the public. These were described as through the roof, and Glotzer said they were some of the best she had seen. It was decided to mostly omit Stephen King's name from any advertising, as the studio wanted to attract a more prestigious audience, who might reject a film from a writer known mostly for pulp fiction works such as The Shining and Cujo. Following early September premieres at the Renaissance Theatre in Mansfield and the Toronto International Film Festival, The Shawshank Redemption began a limited North American release on September 23, 1994. During its opening weekend, the film grossed $727,327 from 33 theaters, an average of $22,040 per theater. Following a Hollywood tradition of visiting different theaters on opening night to see the audiences view their film live, Darabont and Glotzer went to the Cinerama Dome, but found no one there. Glotzer claimed that the pair actually sold 2 tickets outside the theater with the promise that if the buyers did not like the film, they could ask Castle Rock Entertainment for a refund. While critics praised the film, Glotzer believed that a lackluster review from the Los Angeles Times pushed crowds away. 2 received a wide release on October 14, 1994, expanding to a total of 944 theaters to earn $2.4 million, an average of $2,545 per theater, finishing as the number 9 film of the weekend behind sex comedy Exit to Eden, $3 million, and just ahead of the historical drama Quiz Show, $2.1 million, which was in its 5th week at the cinemas. The Shawshank Redemption closed in late November 1994 after 10 weeks with an approximate total gross of $16 million. It was initially considered a box office bomb, failing to recoup its $25 million budget, not including marketing costs and the cinema exhibitors' cuts. The film was also competing with Pulp Fiction, $108 million, which also premiered October 14th following its Palme d'Or Award win, and Forrest Gump, $330 million, which was in the middle of a successful 42-week theatrical run. Both films would become quotable cultural phenomena. A general audience trend towards action films starring the likes of Bruce Willis and Arnold Schwarzenegger was also considered to work against the commercial success of The Shawshank Redemption. Freeman blamed the title, saying it was unmemorable, while Robbins recalled fans asking, "What was that Shawshank Reduction thing?" Several alternative titles had been posited before the release due to concerns that it was not a marketable title. The low box office was also blamed on a lack of female characters to broaden the audience demographics, the general unpopularity of prison films, and the bleak tone used in its marketing. After being nominated for several Oscars in early 1995, the film was re-released between February and March, earning a further $12 million. In total, the film grossed $28.3 million in the United States and Canada, and $45 million from other markets for a worldwide total of $73.3 million. In the United States, it became the 51st highest-grossing film of 1994 and the 21st highest-grossing R-rated film of 1994. Post-theatrical. Despite its disappointing box office returns in what was then considered a risky move, Warner Home Video shipped 320,000 rental video copies throughout the United States in 1995. It went on to become the top-rented film of that year. Positive recommendations, repeat customer viewings, and being well received by both male and female audiences were considered key to the film's rental success. Ted Turner's Turner Broadcasting System had acquired Castle Rock Entertainment in 1993, which enabled his television channel, TNT, to obtain the cable broadcast rights to the film. According to Glotzer, because of the low box office numbers, TNT could air the film at a very low cost, but still charge premium advertising rates. The film began airing regularly on the network in June 1997. Television airings of the film accrued record-breaking numbers, 21, and its repeated broadcast was considered essential to turning the film into a cultural phenomenon after its poor box office performance. Aunt felt the turning point for the film's success was the Academy Award nominations, saying nobody had heard of the movie, and that year on the Oscar broadcast they were mentioning this movie 7 times. In 1996, the rights to The Shawshank Redemption were acquired by Warner Bros. Pictures following the merger of its parent company, Time Warner, with the Turner Broadcasting System. In the United Kingdom, the film was watched by 1.11 million viewers on the subscription television channel Film 4 in 2006, making it the year's second most watched film on subscription digital television. By 2013, The Shawshank Redemption had aired on 15 basic cable networks, and in that year occupied 151 hours of airtime, rivaling Scarface, 1983, and behind only Mrs. Doubtfire, 1993. It was in the top 15% of movies among adults between the ages of 18 and 49 on the Spike, Up, Sundance TV, and Lifetime channels. Despite its mainly male cast, it was the most watched movie on the female-targeted OWN network. In a 2014 Wall Street Journal article based on the margin studios take from box office returns, home media sales, and television licensing, The Shawshank Redemption had made an estimated $100 million. Jeff Baker, then executive vice president and general manager of Warner Bros. Home Entertainment, said that the home video sales had earned about $80 million, while finances for licensing the film for television are unknown. In 2014, current and former Warner Bros. Executives confirmed that it was one of the highest valued assets in the studio's $1.5 billion library. That same year, Gunton said that by its 10th anniversary in 2004, he was still earning six-figure residual payments and was still earning a substantial income from it, which was considered unusual so many years after its release. Reception. Critical response. The Shawshank Redemption opened to generally positive reviews. Some reviewers compared the film to other well-received prison dramas, including Birdman of Alcatraz, Cool Hand Luke, and Riot in Cell Block 11. Gene Siskel said that, like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, The Shawshank Redemption is an inspirational drama about overcoming overbearing authority. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of A on an A+ to F scale. Entertainment Weekly's Owen Gleiberman said that Freeman makes the Red character feel genuine and lived in. Janet Maslin of the New York Times said that Freeman was quietly impressive, but lamented that Red's role in the film had limited range, restricted to observing Andy. She considered Freeman's commanding performance made him a much stronger figure than simply an observer. Maslin said that Freeman's performance was especially moving when describing how dependent Red had become on living within the prison walls. Variety's Leonard Clady suggested that Freeman had the showier role, allowing him a grace and dignity that came naturally, without ever becoming banal, and the Washington Post's Desson Howe called Freeman a master of comedic and poignant cadence. Even Kenneth Turin's Los Angeles Times review, which Glotzer credited with derailing the film's box office success, praised Freeman, saying his effortless screen presence lends Shawshank the closest thing to credibility it can manage. Of Robbins' performance, Gleiberman said that in his laconic good guy, Neo Gary Cooper role, Robbins is unable to make Andy connect with the audience. Conversely, Maslin said that Andy has the more subdued role, but that Robbins portrays him intensely and effectively depicts the character as he transitions from new prisoner to aged father figure, and Clady stated that his riveting, unfussy, precise, honest, and seamless performance anchors the film. Howe said that while the character is cheesily messianic for easily charming everyone to his side, comparing him to Forrest Gump Goes to Jail, Robbins exudes the perfect kind of innocence to sell the story. The Hollywood Reporter stated that both Freeman and Robbins gave outstanding, layered performances that imbued their characters with individuality. 88, and Rolling Stone's Peter Travers said that the pair created something undeniably powerful and moving. Gunton and Brown were deemed by Clady as extremely credible in their villainy, while Howe countered that Gunton's warden was a cliched character who extols religious virtues while having people murdered. Maslin called the film an impressive directorial debut that tells a gentle tale with a surprising amount of loving car, while Clady said the only failings came when Darabont focused for too long on supporting characters or embellished a secondary story. The Hollywood Reporter said that both the directing and writing were crisp, while criticizing the film's long-running time. Clady said that the length and tone, while tempered by humor and unexpected events, would dampen the film's mainstream appeal, but the story offered a fascinating portrait of the innate humanity of the inmates. Gleiberman disliked that the prisoners' crimes were overlooked to portray them more as good guys. Turan similarly objected to what he perceived as extreme violence and rape scenes, and making most of the prisoners seem like a bunch of swell and soft-hearted guys to cast the prison experience in a rosy glow. Clady summarized the film as estimable and haunting entertainment, comparing it to a rough diamond with small flaws. But Howe criticized it for deviating with multiple subplots and pandering by choosing to resolve the story with Andy and Red's reunion, rather than leaving the mystery. Ebert noted that the story works because it is not about Andy as the hero, but how Red perceives him. Deacon's cinematography was roundly praised, with The Hollywood Reporter calling it foreboding and well-crafted, and Travers saying, "The everyday agonies of prison life are meticulously laid out. You can almost feel the frustration and rage seeping into the skin of the inmates." Gleiberman praised the choice of scenery, writing, "The moss-dark, saturated images have a redolent sensuality. You feel as if you could reach out and touch the prison walls." The Hollywood Reporter said of Newman's score, "At its best moments, alights with radiant textures and sprightly grace notes, nicely emblematic of the film's central theme." And Clady described it as the right balance between the somber and the absurd. Accolade. The film was nominated for 7 Academy Awards in 1995, the most for a Stephen King film adaptation. Best Picture, Marvin. Best Actor, Freeman. Best Adapted Screenplay, Darabont. Best Cinematography, Deakins. Best Film Editing, Richard Francis Bruce. Best Sound, Robert J. Litt, Elliot Tyson, Michael Herbig, and Willie D. Burton. And Best Original Score, Newman, his first Academy Award nomination. It did not win in any category. It received 2 Golden Globe Award nominations for Best Performance by an Actor in a Motion Picture for Freeman, and Best Screenplay for Darabont. Robbins and Freeman were both nominated for Outstanding Performance by a Male Actor in a Leading Role at the inaugural Screen Actors Guild Awards in 1995. Darabont was nominated for a Directors Guild of America Award in 1994 for Best Director of a Feature Film, and a Writers Guild of America Award for Best Adapted Screenplay. Deakins won the American Society of Cinematographers Award for Outstanding Achievement in Cinematography, while producer Nikki Marvin was nominated for a 1994 Golden Laurel Award by the Producers Guild of America. Legacy Darabont later adapted and directed 2 other King stories, The Green Mile, 1999, and The Mist, 2007. In a 2016 interview, King said that The Shawshank Redemption was his favorite adaptation of his work, alongside Stand By Me. The oak tree, under which Andy leaves a note for Red directing him to Zihuatanejo, became a symbol of hope for its role in the film and is considered iconic. In 2016, the New York Times reported that the tree attracted thousands of visitors annually. The tree was partially destroyed on July 29, 2011, when it was split by lightning, and news of the damage was reported by U.S. and international publications. The tree was completely felled by strong winds on or around July 22, 2016, and its vestiges were cut down in April 2017. The remains were turned into the Shawshank Redemption memorabilia, including rock hammers and magnets. The prison site, which was planned to be fully torn down after filming, became a tourist attraction. The Mansfield Reformatory Preservation Society, a group of enthusiasts of the film, purchased the building and site from Ohio for $1 in 2000 and took up maintaining it as a historical landmark, both as its purpose as a prison and as the filming site. A 2019 report estimated the attraction to be earning $16 million in annual revenue. Many of the rooms and props remain there, including the false pipe through which Andy escapes, and a portion of the oak tree from the finale, after it was damaged in 2011. The surrounding area is also visited by fans, while local businesses market Shawshanwiches and bunt cakes in the shape of the prison. According to the Mansfield-Richland County Convention and Visitors Bureau, later renamed Destination Mansfield, Tourism in the area had increased every year since the Shawshank Redemption premiered, and in 2013 drew in 18,000 visitors and over $3 million to the local economy. As of 2019, Destination Mansfield operates the Shawshank Trail, a series of 15 marked stops around locations related to the film across Mansfield, Ashland, Upper Sandusky, and St. Croix. The trail earned $16.9 million in revenue in 2018. In late August 2014, a series of events was held in Mansfield to celebrate the film's 20th anniversary, including a screening of the film at the Renaissance Theater, a bus tour of certain filming locations, and a cocktail party at the Reformatory. Cast from the film attended some of the events, including Gunton, Scott Mann, Renee Blaine, and James Kosicki. The 25th anniversary was similarly celebrated in August 2019. Guests included Darabont, Blaine, Mann, Gunton, Alfonso Freeman Bellows, Rolston, Claire Slimmer, and Frank Medrano. Darabont stated that only at this event, the first time he had returned to Mansfield, was he able to realize the lasting impact of the film, stating, "It is a very surreal feeling to be back all these years later and people are still talking about it." Critical reassessment. Contemporary review aggregation website Rotten Tomatoes gives the film an 89% approval rating from 146 critics, with an average rating of 8.3 or 10. The consensus reads, "Steeped in old-fashioned storytelling and given evergreen humanity by Morgan Freeman and Tim Robbins, The Shawshank Redemption chronicles the hardship of incarceration patiently enough to come by its uplift honestly." The film also has a score of 82 out of 100 on Metacritic based on 22 critics, indicating universal acclaim. In 1999, film critic Roger Ebert listed Shawshank on his list of the great movies. The American Film Institute ranked the film number 72 on its 2007 AFI's 100 Years, .100 Movies 10th Anniversary Edition list, outranking Forrest Gump, 76, and Pulp Fiction, 94, which were released the same year. It was also number 23 on AFI's 100 Years, .100 Cheers, 2006, list charting inspiring films. In 2005, the Writers Guild of America listed Darabont's screenplay at number 22 on its list of the 101 greatest screenplays, and in 2006, Film 4 listed at number 13 on its list of 50 films to see before you die. In 2014, The Shawshank Redemption was named Hollywood's fourth favorite film, based on a survey of 2,120 Hollywood-based entertainment industry members. Entertainment lawyers skewed the most towards the film. In 2017, the Daily Telegraph named it the 17th best prison film ever made, and USA Today listed it as one of the 50 best films of all time. In 2019, Games Radar Plus listed its ending as one of the best of all time. The Shawshank Redemption appeared on several lists of the greatest films of the 1990s by outlets including Paste and NME 2012, Complex 2013, Chud.com 2014, MSN 2015, The Wrap, Maxim, and Rolling Stone, all 2017. Cultural influence. In November 2014, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences celebrated the film's 20th anniversary with a special one-night screening at the Samuel Goldwyn Theater in Beverly Hills, California. In 2015, the film was selected by the United States Library of Congress to be preserved in the National Film Registry for being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Darabont responded, "I can think of no greater honor than for The Shawshank Redemption to be considered part of our country's cinematic legacy." Variety said that the word Shawshank could be used to instantly convey images of a prison. The significant and enduring public appreciation for the film has often been difficult for critics to define. In an interview, Freeman said, "About everywhere you go, people say, 'The Shawshank Redemption, greatest movie I ever saw,' and that such praise just comes out of them." Robbins said, "I swear to God, all over the world, wherever I go, there are people who say, 'That movie changed my life.'" In a separate interview, Stephen King said, "If that isn't the best adaptation of my works, it's one of the 2 or 3 best, and certainly in moviegoers' minds, it's probably the best, because it generally rates at the top of these surveys they have of movies. I never expected anything to happen with it. In a 2014 Variety article, Robbins claimed that South African politician Nelson Mandela told him about his love for the film. While it has been cited as a source of inspiration by several sportsmen including Johnny Wilkinson, UK, Agustin Pichot, Argentina, Al Charon, Canada, and Dan Lyle, USA, and Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York. Gunton said he had encountered fans in Morocco, Australia, South America, Germany, France, and Bora Bora. Director Steven Spielberg said that the film was a chewing gum movie. If you step on it, it sticks to your shoe. Speaking on the film's 25th anniversary, Darabont said that older generations were sharing it with younger generations, contributing to its longevity. It has been the #1 film on IMDb's user-generated Top 250 since 2008, when it surpassed The Godfather, having remained at or near the top since the late 1990s. In the United Kingdom, readers of Empire voted the film as the best of the 1990s, the greatest film of all time in 2006, and it placed #4 on Empire's 2008 list of the 500 greatest movies of all time, and their 2017 list of the 100 greatest movies. In March 2011, the film was voted by BBC Radio 1 and BBC Radio 1 Extra listeners as their favorite film of all time. It regularly appears on Empire's Top 100 Films, was named the greatest film to not win the Academy Award for Best Picture in a 2013 poll by Sky UK. It lost to Forrest Gump and ranked as Britain's favorite film in a 2015 YouGov poll. When the British Film Institute analyzed the demographic breakdown of the YouGov poll, it noted that The Shawshank Redemption was not the top-ranked film in any group, but was the only film to appear in the top 15 of every age group, suggesting it is able to connect with every polled age group, unlike Pulp Fiction, which fared better with younger voters, and Gone with the Wind, 1939, with older voters. 2017 poll conducted by Gatwick Airport also identified the film as the 4th best to watch while in flight. When English film critic Mark Kermode interviewed a host of United States moviegoers, they compared it to a religious experience. It was also voted as New Zealand's favorite film in a 2015 poll. Lasting fan appreciation has led to it being considered one of the most beloved films of all time. It is a strange comment to make about a film set inside a prison, but The Shawshank Redemption creates a warm hold on our feelings because it makes us a member of a family. Many movies offer us vicarious experiences and quick, superficial emotions. Shawshank slows down and looks. It uses the narrator's calm, observant voice to include us in the story of men who have formed a community behind bars. It is deeper than most films, about continuity in a lifetime, based on friendship and hope. Interesting that although the hero of the film is the convicted former banker Andy Dufresne, Tim Robbins, the action is never seen from his point of view. The film's opening scene shows him being given 2 life sentences for the murder of his wife and her lover. And then we move permanently to a point of view representing the prison population, and particularly the lifer Ellis Red Redding, Morgan Freeman. It is his voice remembering the first time he saw Andy looked like a stiff breeze would blow him over, and predicting wrongly that he wouldn't make it in prison. From Andy's arrival on the prison bus to the film's end, we see only how others see him. Red, who becomes his best friend, Brooks, the old librarian, the corrupt Warden Norton, guards and prisoners. Red is our surrogate. He's the one we identify with, and the redemption, when it comes, is Red's. We've been shown by Andy's example that you have to keep true to yourself, not lose hope, bide your time, set a quiet example, and look for your chance. I guess it comes down to a simple choice, really, he tells Red. Get busy living or get busy dying. The key to the film's structure, I think, is that it's not about its hero, but about our relationship with him, our curiosity, our pity, our admiration. If Andy had been the heroic center, bravely enduring, the film would have been conventional and less mysterious. But we wonder about this guy. Did he really kill those 2 people? Why does he keep so much to himself? Why can he amble through the prison yard like a free man on a stroll when everyone else plods or sidles? People like excitement at the movies, and titles that provide it do well. Films about redemption are approached with great wariness. A lot of people are not thrilled by the prospect of a great film. It sounds like work. But there's a hunger for messages of hope, and when a film offers one, it's likely to have staying power, even if it doesn't grab an immediate audience. The Shawshank Redemption premiered at the Toronto Film Festival in September 1994 and opened a few weeks later. It got good reviews but did poor business. Its $18 million original gross didn't cover costs. It took in only another $10 million after winning 7 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture. There wasn't much going for it. It had a terrible title. It was a prison drama, and women don't like those. It contained almost no action. It starred actors who were respected but not big stars, and it was long at 142 minutes. Clearly, this was a movie that needed word of mouth to find an audience, and indeed business was slowly but steadily growing when it was yanked from theaters. If it had been left to find its way, it might have continued to build and run for months, but that's not what happened. Instead, in one of the most remarkable stories in home video history, it found its real mass audience on tapes and discs and through TV screenings. Within 5 years, Shawshank was a phenomenon, a video bestseller and renter that its admirers feel they've discovered for themselves. When the Wall Street Journal ran an article about the Shawshank groundswell in April 1999, it was occupying first place in the Internet Movie Database worldwide vote of the 250 best films. It's usually in the top 5. Polls and rentals reflect popularity but don't explain why people value Shawshank so fervently. Maybe it plays more like a spiritual experience than a movie. It does have entertaining payoff moments, as when the guards from another prison, wearing their baseball uniforms, line up to have Andy do their taxes. But much of the movie involves quiet, solitude, and philosophical discussions about life. The moments of violence, as when Andy is sexually assaulted, are seen objectively, not exploited. The movie avoids lingering on Andy's suffering. After beatings, he's seen in medium and long shot, tactfully. The camera doesn't focus on Andy's wounds or bruises, but like his fellow prisoners, gives him his space. The Morgan Freeman character is carrier of the film's spiritual arc. We see him at 3 parole hearings after 20, 30, and 40 years. The first hearing involves storytelling trickery. The film has opened with Andy's sentencing, and then we see a parole board and expect it's about to listen to Andy's appeal. But no, that's when we first see Red. In his first appeal, he tries to convince the board he's been rehabilitated. In the second, he just goes through the motions. In the third, he rejects the whole notion of rehabilitation. And somehow in doing so, he sets his spirit free, and the board releases him. There's an underlying problem. Behind bars, Red is king. He's the prison fixer, able to get you a pack of cigarettes, a little rock pick, or a Rita Hayworth poster. On the outside, he has no status or identity. We've already seen what happened to the old librarian, James Whitmore, lonely and adrift in freedom. The last act, in which Andy helps Red accept his freedom, is deeply moving. All the more so because Andy again operates at a distance with letters and postcards and is seen through Red's mind. Frank Darabont wrote and directed the film, basing it on a story by Stephen King. His film grants itself a leisure that most films are afraid to risk. The movie is as deliberate, considered, and thoughtful as Freeman's narration. There's a feeling in Hollywood that audiences have short attention spans and must be assaulted with fresh novelties. I think such movies are slower to sit through than a film like Shawshank, which absorbs us and takes away the awareness that we are watching a film. Deliberate, too, is the dialogue. Tim Robbins makes Andy a man of few words, quietly spoken. He doesn't get real worked up. He is his own man, capable of keeping his head down for years and then indulging in a grand gesture, as when he plays an aria from Mozart's The Marriage of Figaro. The overhead shot of the prisoners in the yard, spellbound by the music, is one of the film's epiphanies. Because he does not volunteer himself, reach out to us, or overplay his feelings, he becomes more fascinating. It is often better to wonder what a character is thinking than to know. Roger Deakins' cinematography is tactful, not showy. two opening shots, one from a helicopter, one of prison walls looming overhead, establish the prison. Shots follow the dialogue instead of anticipating it. Thomas Newman's music enhances rather than informs, and there's a subtle touch in the way deep bass rumblings during the early murder are reprised when a young prisoner recalls another man's description of the crime. Darabont constructs the film to observe the story, not to punch it up or upstage it. Upstaging, in fact, is unknown in this film. The actors are content to stay within their roles, the story moves in an orderly way, and the film itself reflects the slow passage of the decades. When they put you in that cell, Red says, when those bars slam home, that's when you know it's for real. Old life blown away in the blink of an eye. Nothing left but all the time in the world to think about it. Watching the film again, I admired it even more than the first time I saw it. Affection for good films often grows with familiarity, as it does with music. Some have said life is a prison. We are Red. Andy is our redeemer. All good art is about something deeper than it admits. The Shawshank Redemption is not the greatest film ever made. Heck, it's not even one of best films of 1994. The year of Pulp Fiction, Hoop Dreams, Chungking Express, Exotica, Quiz Show, and the last two entries in Krzysztof Kieślowski's Three Colors trilogy. And yet it continues to sit at or near the top of IMDb's top 250, currently a shade above The Godfather and The Dark Knight, despite opening to polite reviews, middling box office, and a resurgent Oscar campaign that nonetheless yielded 0 awards. That's an incredible comeback story. A video and cable-fueled long game as steady and methodical as, say, spending 2 decades chipping a hole in the prison walls with a rock hammer. Much of the film's standing in a site like the IMDb has to do with mass consensus. In this case, about 3 million voters rallying around a drama that's broadly loved, which would not happen for a film like the recent Sight and Sound Critics poll winner Gene Dealman, a 200-minute temporal experiment that appeals to a narrower subset of viewers. Yet plenty of acclaimed studio movies are aimed at the largest audience possible, so it's significant that The Shawshank Redemption still speaks profoundly to so many people 30 years later. There are any number of obvious reasons for that, starting with a Morgan Freeman performance that uses his serene gravitas as much for storytelling as it does for soulful character work. Yet writer-director Frank Darabont, working from the Stephen King novella Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption, has made an old-fashioned prison drama that stealthily and at times shamelessly evolves into a jailbreak movie in both the spiritual and literal sense of the term. It grips you first as an uplifting lesson in how to break free of earthly confinements before angling toward an even happier ending, one that rewards the ingenuity of its inmate heroes while giving the bad guys their just desserts. That's Hollywood, perhaps, but there's a depth of feeling to The Shawshank Redemption that's well-earned, tied to a central friendship that spans decades and grows through resistance, like green shoots through cracks in the prison yard. Banker Andy Dufresne, Tim Robbins, is sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences for murdering his wife and her lover, and the judge condemns him for his cold calculation during trial. It turns out only the latter part is true. When Andy arrives at Shawshank State Prison in 1947, the roughnecks who populate the place, especially Ellis Red Redding, assume this reedy, white-collar man will crack, but prison just sharpens his resolve. Told that Red is a go-to source for contraband, Andy orders a rock hammer and a large poster of Rita Hayworth, which seems to indicate an uncommon passion for geology and a common passion for bombshells. Yet Red quickly comes to appreciate Andy's resilience in the face of repeated sexual assaults and his persistence in making prison better for himself and the men around him. Andy and Red also share a gift for finding the angles, whether through Red's sophisticated contraband operation or Andy's shrewdly leveraging his accounting skills to win 3 cold beers apiece for his buddies after a day of hard labor. When the Bible-thumping warden, Bob Gunton, starts exploiting prison workers for fat contracts and kickbacks on the outside, he brings in Andy to cook the books, which earns him and his friends more favorable treatment, but poses the obvious risk of making him an important cog to a huge illegal operation. He gets the resources for his pet project to expand the prison library, but unusually terrible hardships lurk around the corner. "Get busy living or get busy dying" is one quotable line from the Shawshank Redemption. "There are places in this world that aren't made out of stone" is another. At times, the film can seem like the foundation of a new religious movement, with Andy as the quietly confident philosophizer telling his fellow inmates and his captives in the audience about an inner spirit that transcends the cruel uncertainty of the outside world. This is how he survives a gang of prison rapists or a month in solitary confinement. And it's how you can survive the setbacks and disappointments of everyday life. It's right there on the movie poster. Hope can set you free. A more tough-minded film might have stopped there. After all, the likeliest outcome for both Andy and Red is that they serve their sentences in full and become institutionalized like their elderly friend Brooks, who doesn't know how to handle parole after 50 years. What's the point of nurturing something inside the warden and his thugs can't touch if achieving actual freedom becomes a possibility? That might give The Shawshank Redemption a more satisfying A-plus cinema score payoff, but minimizes the power of guys like Andy and Red, learning to define hope and liberation from behind cold iron bars. Still, it's hard to deny the rousing satisfaction of the film's payoff or the deft chiseling of the plot and characterization that make it possible. Even in 1994, mainstream productions with the sturdy craft of The Shawshank Redemption were getting more difficult to find, and they're virtually impossible 3 decades later, when mid-budgeted period pieces are stuck in no man's land. There haven't been many films since, with a kinship quite as affecting as that between Andy and Red, who strive to make the best of a bad situation, which is what friends often have to do for each other. What they don't have is a writer to make the situation go away. The screenplay is murdered on the orders of Warden Norton, who is a composite of several Warden characters in King's story. Darabont opted to create a single Warden character to serve as the primary antagonist. Among his inspirations, Darabont listed the works of director Frank Capra, including Mrs. Smith Goes to Washington, 1939, and It's a Wonderful Life describing the Mastall tales. Darabont likened The Shawshank Redemption to a tall tale more than a prison movie. He also cited Goodfellas 1990 as an inspiration on the use of dialogue, too. Illustrateth Passage of Time in the script and the prison drama Birdman of Alcatraz, directed by John Frankenheimer. While later scouting filming locations, Darabont happened up on Frankenheimer, who was scouting for his own prison set project. Against the wall, Darabont recalled that Frankenheimer took time out from his scouting to provide Darabont with encouragement and advice at the time prison-based films were not considered likely box office successes, but Darabont's script was read by then Castle Rock Entertainment producer Liz Glatzer, whose interest in prison stories and reaction to the script led her to threaten to quit if Castle Rock Entertainment did not produce The Shawshank Redemption. 8 director and Castle Rock Entertainment co-founder Rob Reiner also liked the script. He offered Darabont between $2.4 million and $3 million to allow him to direct it himself. Reiner, who had previously adapted King's 1982 novella. The body into the 1986 film Stand By Me planned to cast Tom Cruise as Andy and Harrison Ford as Red Castle Rock Entertainment offered to finance any other film Darabont wanted to develop. Darabont seriously considered the offer, sitting growing up poor in Los Angeles, believing it would elevate his standing in the industry and that Castle Rock Entertainment could have contractually fired him and given the film to Reiner anyway, but he chose to remain the director, saying in a 2014 Variety interview, "You can continue to defer your dreams in exchange for money and die without ever having done the thing you set out to do." Reiner served as Darabont's mentor on the project instead within 2 weeks of showing the script to Castle Rock Entertainment. Darabont had a $25 million budget to make his film, and pre-production began in January 1993. Music main article The Shawshank Redemption. The film score was composed by Thomas Newman. He felt that it already elicited such strong emotions without music that found it difficult to compose one that would elevate scenes without distracting from them. The piece Shawshank Redemption plays during Andy's escape from Shawshank and originally had a 3-note motif, but Darabont felt it had too much of a triumphal flourish and asked that it be toned down to a single note motif so as Red played following Red's release from prison and leading to his discovery of Andy's cache became one of Newman's favorite pieces. The piece was initially written for a solo until Newman reluctantly agreed to add harmonica. Reference to the harmonica Red receives from Andy to continue his message of hope. According to Darabont, harmonica player Tommy Morgan casually delivered something dead on perfect on the first take, and this is heard in the finished film. Newman's score was so successful that excerpts from it were used in movie trailers for years afterwards release. Leading up to its release, the film was test screened with the public. These were described as through the roof, and Glotzer said they were some of the best she had seen, 877. It was decided to mostly omit Stephen King's name from any advertising as the studio wanted to attract a more prestigious audience who might reject a film from a writer known mostly for pulp fiction works such as The Shining and Cujo, following early September premieres at the Renaissance Theatre in Mansfield and the Toronto International Film Festival. The Shawshank Redemption began a limited North American release on September 23, 1994 during its opening weekend. The film grossed $727,027 from 33 theaters, an average of $22,040 per theater, following a Hollywood tradition of visiting different theaters on opening night to see the audiences view their film live. Darabont and Glotzer went to the Kurama Dome, but found no one there. Glotzer claimed that the pair actually sold 2 tickets outside the theater, with the promise that if the buyers did not like the film, they could ask Castle Rock Entertainment for a refund, while critics praised the film. Glotzer believed that a lackluster review from the Los Angeles Times pushed crowds away. It received a wide release on October 14, 1994, expanding to a total of 944 theaters to earn $2.44 million, an average of $2,545 per theater, finishing as the number 9 film of the weekend behind sex comedy Exit to Eden and just ahead of the historical drama Quiz Show, which was in its 5th week at the cinemas. The Shawshank Redemption closed in late November 1994 after 10 weeks with an approximate total gross of $16 million. It was initially considered a box office bomb, failing to the cinema exhibitors' cuts. The film was also competing with Pulp Fiction, which also premiered October 14th, following its Palme d'Or win, and Forrest Gump, which was in the middle of a successful 42-week theatrical run. Both films would become quotable cultural phenomena, a general audience trend towards action films starring the likes of Bruce Willis. And Arnold Schwarzenegger was also considered to work against the commercial success of the Shawshank Redemption. Freeman blamed the title, saying it was unmemorable 8, while Robbins recalled fans asking, "What was that Shawshank Redemption thing?" Several alternative titles had been posited before the release due to concerns that it was not a marketable title. The low box office was also blamed on a lack of female characters to broaden the audience demographics. The general unpopularity of prison films and the bleak tone used in its marketing, after being nominated for several Oscars in early 1995, the film was re-released between February and March, earning a further $12 million in total. The film grossed $28.3 million in the United States and Canada, and $45 million from other markets, for a worldwide total of $73.3 million in the United States. It became the 51st highest-grossing film of 1994 and the 21st highest-grossing R-rated film of 1994. The Shawshank Redemption movie review. It is a strange comment to make about a film set inside a prison, but The Shawshank Redemption creates a warm hold on our feelings because it makes Zeus a member of a family. Many movies offer us vicarious experiences and quick superficial emotions. Shawshank slows down and looks at Zeus, the narrator's calm, observant voice, to include use in the story of men who have formed a community behind bars. It is deeper than most films about continuity in a lifetime, based on friendship and hope. Interesting that although the hero of the film is the convicted former banker Andy Dufresne, Tim Robbins, the action is never seen from his point of view. The film's opening scene shows him being given 2 life sentences for the murder of his wife and her lover. And then we move permanently to a point of view representing the prison population, and particularly the lifer. Alice Red reading Morgan Freeman. It is his voice. remembering the first time he saw Andy look like a stiff breeze would blow him over, and predicting wrongly that he wouldn't make it in prison. From Andy's arrival on the prison bus to the film's end, we see only how others see him. Red, who becomes his best friend. Brooks, the old librarian. The corrupt warden. Norton guards and prisoners. Red is our surrogate. He's the one we identify with. And the redemption, when it comes, is Red's. We've been shown by Andy's example that you have to keep true to yourself, not lose hope. Be your time, set a quiet example, and look for your... It comes down to a simple choice, really. He tells Red, get busy living or get busy. Dying, the key to the film structure, I think, is that it's not about its hero, but about our relationship with him, our curiosity, our pity, our admiration. If Andy had been the heroic sinner bravely, enduring the film would have been conventional and less mysterious. But we wonder about this guy. Did he really kill those two people? Why does he keep so much to himself? Why can he amble through the prison yard like a free man on a stroll when everyone else plots or siddles people, like excitement at the movies and titles that provide it? Do well. Films about redemption are approached with great weariness. A lot of people are not thrilled by the prospect of a great film. It sounds like work, but there's a hunger for messages of hope. And when a film offers one, it's likely to have staying power, even if it doesn't grab an immediate audience. The Shawshank Redemption premiered at the Toronto Film Festival in September 1994 and opened a few weeks later. It got good reviews but did poor business. It's $18 million original gross didn't cover costs. It took in only another $10 million after winning 7 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture. There wasn't much going for it. It had a terrible title. It was a prison drama, and women don't like those. It contained almost no action. It starred actors who were respected but not big stars, and it was long at 142 minutes. Clearly, this was a movie that needed word of mouth to find an audience, and indeed business was slowly but steadily growing when it was yanked from theaters. As if it had been left to find its way, it might have continued to build and run 4 months, but that's not what happened. Instead, in one of the most remarkable stories in home video history, it found its real mass audience. On tapes and discs and through TV screenings within 5 years, Shawshank was a phenomenon, a video bestseller and renter that its admirers feel they've discovered for themselves. When the Wall Street Journal ran an article about the Shawshank groundswell in April 1999, it was occupying first place in the Internet Movie Database worldwide vote of the 250 best films. It's usually in the top 5 polls, and rentals reflect popularity, but don't explain why people value Shawshank so fervently. Maybe it plays more like a spiritual experience than a movie. It does have entertaining payoff moments, as when the guards from another prison wearing their baseball uniforms line up to have Andy do their taxes. But much of the movie involves quiet solitude and philosophical discussions about life. The moments of violence, as when Andy is sexually assaulted, are seen objectively, not exploited. The movie avoids lingering on Andy's suffering after beatings. He's seen in medium and long shot tactfully. The camera doesn't focus on Andy's wounds or bruises, but like his fellow prisoners, gives him his space. The Morgan parole hearings after 20, 30, and 40 years, the first hearing involves storytelling trickery. The film has opened with Andy's sentencing, and then we see a parole board and expect it's about to listen to Andy's appeal. But that's when we first see Red in his first appeal. He tries to convince the board he's been rehabilitated. In these he just goes through the motions in the third. He rejects the whole notion of rehabilitation, and somehow in doing so sets his spirit free, and the board releases him. There's an underlying problem behind bars. Redisking he's the prison fixable to get you a pack of cigarettes, a little rock pick, or a Rita Hayworth poster on the outside. He has no status or identity. We've already seen what happened to the old librarian James Whitmore, lonely and adrift in freedom. The last act, in which Andy helps Reed accept his freedom, is deeply moving all the more, so because Andy again operates at distance with letters and postcards, and is seen through Red's mind. Frank Darabont wrote and directed the film, basing it on a story by Stephen King. His film grants itself a leisure that most films are afraid to risk. The movie is as deliberate, considered, and thoughtful as Freeman's narration. There's a feeling in Hollywood that audiences have short attention spans and must be assaulted with fresh novelties. It thinks such movies are slower to sit Through Thanafilm like Shawshank, which absorbs views and takes away the awareness that we're watching a film deliberate to us the dialogue, Tim Robbins makes Andy in a few words quietly spoken he doesn't get real. Worked up, he is his own man, capable of keeping his head down for years, and then indulging in a grand gesture, as when he plays an aria from Mozart's The Marriage of Figaro. The overhead shot of the prisoners in the yard, spellbound by the music, is one of the film's epiphes. Because he does not volunteer himself, reach out to us, or overplay his feelings, he becomes more fascinating. It is often better to wonder what a character is thinking than to know. Roger Deakins' cinematography is tactful, not showy. 2 opening shots, one from a helicopter, one of prison walls looming overhead, establish the prison shots, follow the dialogue instead of anticipating it. Thomas Newman's music enhances rather than informs, and there is a subtle touch in the way deep bass rumblings during the early murder are repried when a young prisoner recalls another man's description of the crime. Darabont constructs the film to observe the story, not to punch it up or upstage it. Upstaging, in fact, is unknown in this film. The actors are content to stay within their roles. The story moves in an orderly way, and the film itself reflects the slow passage of the decades when they put you in that cell. Red says when those bars slam home, that's when you know it's for real. Old life blown away in the blink of an eye. Nothing left, but all the time in the world to think about it, watching the film again. I admired it, even more than the first time I saw it. Affection for good films often grows with familiarity, as it does with music, is about something deeper than it admits. Okay, before I launch into this review, you must promise that you, the reader, will not kill me when you scroll down and see what I have to say about the Shawshank Redemption. Under no circumstances are you allowed to take a hit out on me or send me anthrax in the mail or order a drone strike on my house. I understand that this film is very beloved and has some impassioned defenders, and I would not like to be on the receiving end of their eye again. However, I felt how I felt about it, and it is my solemn duty to report that Shawshank just did not hit like I thought it would. For my second installment in the Summer Throwback Thursday series, I will be reviewing this film with the steadfast candor that you have come to expect from this author, and you will just have to deal. The Shawshank Redemption contains about 160 minutes of absolutely excellent movie. Unfortunately, the runtime of the film is 202 minutes, somewhere along the way. All of the elements that I found exciting, interesting, and moving eventually transformed into elements that I began to find exhausting, corny, and overwrought. Many films suffer from the tragic condition of being too damn long, and this is one such case. However, it's not simply that Shawshank gave us too much of a good thing. Its ample runtime afforded me the space to get really sick of the film moments that I found powerful earlier began to go rotten in my recollection. The main character, Andy Dufresne, Tim Robbins began to grate on me his steadfastness and infinite supply of kindness and intelligence, prompting full-on roles by the time the film was complete. Any intrigue or emotion evoked by Shawshank had dried up, leaving me with a bitter sense of curdled sentimentality. The film, narrated by Morgan Freeman as longtime prisoner Red, follows the miserable life of Mr. Dufresne after his imprisonment for murdering his wife and her lover. The veracity of his guilt is left intentionally vague for the majority of the film, briefly allowing for some rare grayness in the film's largely black and white moral landscape. Dufresne was an affluent banker before going to Shawshank State Penitentiary, cutting a comparatively weak figure among the hardened felons surrounding him, despite horrifying brutalization from fellow prisoners and guards. Drain manages to survive and eventually thrive in prison, making valuable friendships and occupying his time with worthwhile pursuits, from revamping the prison library, helping guards from around New England file their taxes, and teaching hapless convicts their ABCs. Dufresne is nothing short of saintly, his genius. Generosity and perseverance make for a compelling character at first, but Dufresne's total lack of flaws starts to get pretty boring endlessly. Torturing an innocent character does not really make them an interesting person, and when everything they set out to do is perfectly executed, one starts losing interest in their plucky endeavors. Has this man never done anything wrong in his life? Is he a human being or a walking life lesson Dufresne, who might as well be a kindly tortoise in one of Youpp's fables, single-handedly restores the hope to every man he encounters in Shawshank prison, all while blackmailing the evil warden and, or course, orchestrating his own escape? He didn't even commit the murders he was imprisoned for in Shaw. Shank's dull good versus evil world. Potential nuance and character flaws are discarded in favor of a book of Job-esque series of miseries inflicted on an innocent man. Woe is me because of his preternatural wit and forethought after 19 years. Dufresne accomplishes the impossible, escaping from Shawshank. His buddy Red manages to get parole after 30 years inside, so he too is granted an escape. In a previous storyline about old-timer Brooks, who couldn't hack it on the outside and hung himself, the audience saw how difficult it was for someone who's been institutionalized to make it in the real world. Red stays at the exact same halfway house as Brooks, which I was told is plausible given the size of the town they're in, but still sticks in my mind. As intolerably cheesy, he carves his name next to Brooks on the ceiling and then gets the hell out of Dodge, following a treasure trail described to him back before they both got out of prison. This occurred on the very day Dufresne escaped, following yet another exchange between him and Red about not letting the man crush your spirit. So I truly believed of device to keep Red's determination alive. Never did I consider that he actually did hide a massive chunk of obsidian way out in the idle of a cornfield beneath a tree where he proposed to his wife, because this struck me as too stupid to be true. It was true, though, and when Red dug up the rock, he found some money and an invitation to come live in Zoedanio, Mexico, with a newly tanned Duane as Red walks down the beach toward his old friend. One has to enjoy the significance of their freedom, fearlessness, and enduring friendship. I am not so jaded and cold as to be immune to the charms of this ending. I was especially appreciative of the narrative shift back to Red's perspective near the end. Since it's ultimately his journey portrayed in this film, it is his evolution from complacency to self-actualization, aided by Dufresne's encouragement and example. In addition to this compelling central arc, the film is visually stunning throughout. There were countless remarkable shots, especially of the prison yard, which still linger in my mind. Shawshank was honestly great while it lasted, and I wish it could have ended before I realized everything that was wrong with it. Instead, the perpetual slog of repetitive plot and emotional manipulation wore thinner than a prison jumpsuit. Other information about this film, long review. I don't rewatch films because I prefer a new story and experience each time. However, I decided on a change since I began reviewing every film I watched since January of this year. At every 50th review, I will rewatch my favorite films of all time, Shawshank Redemption is my favorite film of all. In my eyes, it's the Jat that I judge every other movie by the standards of you might expect a 10, but I don't give 10 for anything. A 9.5 is the highest score attainable on my scale, and to date I have only given the Gunton films out of 587 films I have watched. Might be a few missing that I watched in my childhood I don't remember, won't go deep into the plot, and drain Tim Robbins, a shrewd banker, is convicted for the murders of his wife and her lover. Even after claiming innocence, they send him to a fictional Shawshank state prison to serve 2 lifetimes without parole. Shawshank key friends Red reading Morgan Freeman, who is also in prison for murder decades earlier, and a master smuggler while claiming his innocence through it all. Andy has to watch his days pass through troubling and painful obstacles to the end of his days as the gay. Film credits run. I'm kidding, of course. Actually, no, not this Andy. This Andy struggles and triumphs. This film inspires me each time I watch, and the ending leaves tears, no matter how many times I have seen it already forth. For me, more than anything, this is a story of hope. I believe hope is perhaps the most important emotion that a person can have. Red thinks hope is a dangerous thing, but Andy replies, hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies. Andy does just that. Holds on to hope through the worst of things. One has a simple choice in life. As Andy says, get busy living or get busy dying. You must choose hope and living every time, no matter the odds or the will required to overcome the mightiest of obstacles. Whether it's a physical prison or a metaphorical prison, hope is your salvation. This film is the epitome of just that. It's also about the power of friendship, freedom, and the triumph of the human spirit. You don't think anyone can make this film better. The filmmakers did justice and then some to Stephen King's original novel, latest one of my favorite literatures of all time. But the film is even better. The technicals are close to perfect script, directing, acting, editing, cinematography, and music. The brilliant cinematography and masterful dialogue keep you captivated in every scene. Robbins and Freeman are sensational in every scene and tailor-made for their respective roles. The entire cast is great in their respective roles. Some tidbits that I found interesting. Robbins went into solitary confinement to prepare for his role. This film received 7 Oscar nominations but didn't win. Any in a historic snub step aside, Forrest Gump and Pulp Fiction, it was also a flop. At the theater, losing money, it became the most rented film of 1995 and made millions as a rental sales. The filmmakers sent King a $5,000 check for the story rights, but King framed it and sent it back to the director Frank Darabont. Not that King needed the money. 54 books published by 1994 by my count. Originally, Rob Reiner was to direct this film with Harrison Ford as Reed and Tom Cruise's. But Darabont decided he would do it for less money. I'm a fan of both Ford and Cruise, but I don't think they can do this film better. Would I recommend it if you have not seen Shawshank at all? I can say is watch it before you die. Nobody knows when or how they will die. This is one film you have to watch, and whatever time you have remaining, it should come. As no surprise, I'm not saying it's the greatest movie ever, but it's certainly one of the easiest to love. There is virtually no aspect of the film that can be improved upon a few more. Notes on the Shawshank Redemption. Directing. Few directors have delivered a debut as masterful as Frank Darab's The Shawshank Redemption, inspired by the sweeping grandeur and Americana intimacy of Steven Spielberg. Darabont turns the walls of Shawshank Penitentiary into an unlikely home. His wide panoramas and high-walled craning. Camera shots are resonant and observant. We're not necessarily trapped in Shawshank. We instead become part of the community. Likewise, the peaceful and painterly cinematography of Roger Deakins enhances the film's optimistic view of friendship and perseverance. This is a film that takes its time and stresses patience. Darabont is very deliberate in his pacing, but his steady hand and grand visuals make The Shawshank Redemption into an epic and intimate tale of human nature. Acting. Andy Durain, played by Tim Robbins, is the film's primary main character. Quiet, intelligent, wrongfully convicted man, Robbins gives Andy an appropriate everyman persona and never lays the sentimentalism on too thick, Christ-like in a way. Robbins' reserved acting allows the viewer to ascribe to him any meaning they see fit. The film's second main character and stand-in for the audience is Red, played by Morgan Freeman, a wise narrator full of natural warmth and dignified charisma. Freeman's performance is the best in the film and perhaps the best of his career. He is the source of Shawshank's deep well of emotion. They are the perfect actors for these roles, writing perhaps more than anything. The Shawshank Redemption is simply a great story. This is a prison film that, like all films of the genre, builds to a triumphant escape, but not in the ways you might think. It is a slow-burning character study with a plot that is unpredictable. In its simplicity, the best example of Darabont's unique screenplay is the introduction of a compelling new character, Tommy Williams, over 90 minutes into the movie. Only a movie that takes its time so thoroughly can pull this off, but such is Shawshank's naturalistic atmosphere. New convicts come and go, and as everything else remains the same forever, and ever the story is so matter-of-fact in its action or lack thereof that we truly come. Talk, know, and love and understand these characters deeply, which is why the ending remains so triumphant despite verging close to contrivance music. Thomas Newman's orchestral score is so successful and fits so well into the overall tapestry of Shawshank that it's easy to misremember it as a pre-existing classical piece. It's not an excerpt from Henrik Gore's Symphony of Sorrowful Songs, stoic, striking, and sororous. The memorable motifs of Shawshank are now a nostalgic touchstone of American film. The Shawshank Redemption is a long film, 142 minutes, that feels even longer than Darab's The Green Mile, 189 minutes for both films. Much of that has to do with the subject matter of a lifelong prison sentence. And in the case of Shawshank, the ending takes a while to actually conclude. In a way, it's like Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. There are multiple climaxes and moments of closure, none of which are tedious, and all of which are necessary. The final half hour or so from Andy's prison break to the triumphant reunion on Zihuatanejo is sentimentalism done right. The slow pace becomes more noticeable in the film's final act. The characters are deserving of their fairy tale ending. Great acting, great directing, and a great story. Makes The Shawshank Redemption an easy grade a movie. I personally prefer The Green Mile, due to its less sentimental conclusion and supernatural ambiguity. But there's no denying Shawshank's immense relatability. More detail, Linda Dufresne and Glenn Quinton are found together murdered in the fall of 1947 with a revolver in hand. The killer stops to reload, giving each victim an extra bullet, tried and convicted for the yow. Murder of his wife and her lover, Andy Dufresne, is sentenced to serve 2 life sentences in Shawshank State Prison following this series of events. And for nearly 20 years he finds his footing while encountering situations and individuals who undoubtedly shape his story through undertones of hardship, loyalty, oppression, and hope. The Shawshank Redemption also dispenses issues of social and class inequality in institutions of mass incarceration. Much of the influence on the film can be accredited to the short story Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption by Stephen King, published in 1982. The novel came after significant events such as the New Mexico State Penitentiary riot and the infamous prison on Alcatraz, both situations involving incarcerated individuals whose related events are separated by several decades, don't fail to extricate the painful truths of the prison system. Phaedra Haywood describes in her piece on the 1980 penitentiary riot the neglectful issue of overcrowding relating to the New Mexico prison. She also notes that individuals much earlier had complained for years about living conditions they said were substandard and violent. Haywood's well-known stories and accounts of the Alcatraz Penitentiary are often glorified and dramatized. Numerous escape attempts have been documented over the years, but less widely known issues related to the prison deal with both prejudice and illegal practices within thought to have largely influenced King's short story. Issues related to Alcatraz and the New Mexico State Penitentiary are notable parallels to the Shawshank Redemption, drawing on its cynicism and criticism of the United States prison system after the court trial sequence in the film, in which Andy receives 2 life sentences. He boards the bus en route to Shawshank Prison, encoded by specific characters and themes. Difference plays a critical role in shaping a crucial audience perspective, shackled in single file. The newly introduced inmates shuffle past the gruff and intimidating prison guard known as Captain Byron Hadley, who is responsible for a majority of brutal and violent acts in the film. Violent altercations between Andy and several inmates do take place during the beginning of his time in prison, but the majority of the violence within the film can be chalked up to authoritarian figures. Violence among inmates is an overused and incredibly common formula in prison films in regards to the body of prisoners in The Shawshank Redemption. The pop culture detective skillfully acknowledges framing fictional prisoners as nothing but a bunch of vicious monsters, helps to reinforce the widespread belief that prisoners in the real world deserve to be exploited, mistreated, or abused behind bars. Pop culture detective The difference between inmates of Shawshank and individuals in a majority of other prison films is a reduction of prisoner violence in this way. The film seeks and succeeds to humanize its most important characters' differences, can also be acknowledged in the film, in the adaptation the prisoners undergoing, their transition to prison, and how it greatly differs from the lives of free men within the film itself is a truth that several of the characters come to realize after being behind bars for so long. It is what they come to know, and adapting to a free society you don't live in is a difficult thing. A greatly influential character in the movie is Brooks Hatland, the prison librarian set for release. He decides to free his pet, Crow Jake, who has relied on the man from its infancy, symbolic of his own experience, once being set free from prison. An animal who has grown accustomed to living in captivity lacks the knowledge and ability to survive on its own. Throughout the film, It is obvious where the power lies with the white, straight, and able-bodied men in these positions of authority in Shawshank. These roles are filled specifically by the prison guards as well as the parole board. As was mentioned previously, perpetrators of violence are almost always the prison guards who receive orders from Warden Norton as he is shot from low angles along with the other prison staff. The audience becomes aware of his authority and the power imbalance that exists, which is largely influenced by the aspects of mice end scene noted within America on film. It is explained that a room with heavy shadows may seem threatening or scary. A camera shooting up from the floor at a character will create a different feeling than a camera aimed at eye level. Ben Schaff. And Griffin 4, with respect to low shot camera angle, the first few scenes inside of the prison provide an accurate example. Myers crying and in obvious distress. A new inmate is shown crouching at the bars of his cell, while the others' audible commotion in the background drawn in by the obvious ruckus. Captain Byron Hadley marches to the distressed man's cell, exuding obvious wicked energy. The man begs with him, saying that he isn't supposed to be here, outwardly frustrated and menacing. Hadley exclaims, "I ain't going to count to 3. I'm not even going to count to 1. You will shut the F up or I'll sing you a lullaby." 18 minutes and 25 seconds as the captain is shot from a low angle. The audience is put in the perspective of the terrified man, powerless and with few choices of his own. Directly discrimination is represented in the Shawshank Redemption. Most of what can be seen in the film are both the belittlement and exploitation of men who are already facing incarceration indirectly and off-screen. An important portion of the narrative that deals with the subject of discrimination is the decided on for the film adaptation by director Frank Darabont. It is explained that Darabont has made the context 1947 specifically because of the widespread social and political discrimination to create a powerful backdrop for the film. The relationship between Andy and his blackened mate read this enhanced, creating a poignant, engaging story. The Shawshank Redemption issues that were not directly addressed on screen are intertwined and evident. Nonetheless, while it may be largely revered today at the time of its release, The Shawshank Redemption was not entirely well received over time. It has earned cult status. The film was largely admonished by the Washington Post, saying that Shawshank is a complete fairy tale, a sentimental yarn filled with the darnest twists and turns. The inmates are ultimately a bunch of cute pushovers. And the worst thing about prison is the boredom. Pop culture detective to that. I would immediately counter that what they are referencing is the necessary humanization of these individuals. Incarceration in Hollywood blockbuster films is often steeped with hyper-masculinity and violence that isn't displayed in this film. We see the inmates of Shawshank as people. For the film encourages the audience to ditch their preconceived notions and heavy cynicism in exchange for possible empathy and a new lens. With a revolver in hand, the killer stops to reload, putting an extra bullet in each victim's head. His name is Elmo Blatch. Innocent of the crime, Andy Dufresne is sentenced to life in prison for 2 murders he didn't commit. His resilience, patience, and long-awaited justice are essential to the ultimate redemption, encountering and examining issues of social inequality. The Shawshank Redemption leads us through an innocent man's experience behind bars. More than that, thought the film hinges on the deep profoundness of hope, and as Ellis Reading came to discover, hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies. There's a painstaking exactness to the Shawshank Redemption that is both laudable and exhausting. The 19 years that the film's protagonist pens behind prison walls is a term shared by the audience. It's vivid and passes with the appropriate tedium and sudden bursts of horror that one imagines reflect the true nature of incarceration. There's a staking exactness to the Shawshank Redemption that's both laudable and exhausting. The 19 years that the film's protagonist pens behind prison walls is a term shared by the audience. It's vivid, grueling, and painful, and passes with the appropriate tedium and sudden bursts of horror that one imagines reflect the true nature of incarceration. Definitely a film requiring careful nurturing. Shawshank will need critical kudos and year-end honors to maintain slow but consistent box office. Mostly one is drawn along by the fascinating serious haul, albeit leavened by humor and the unexpected that will put a crimp in the pic's mainstream acceptance. The saga begins in 1947 when Bank Vice President Andy Duffer Tim Robbins goes on trial for the murder of his wife and her lover, though has strenuously maintained his innocence, his dispassionate demeanor. Grates on the court, circumstantial evidence proves enough to land him in Shawshank prison with 2 concurrent life sentences, while it's unquestionably Andy's story. The Chronicle is related in voiceover by Red Morgan Freeman, a lifer who set himself up as someone who can get things from the outside. He marvels at the new man's tenacity, knowing intrinsically that Andy is different and that he likes him quirks and all, while the film pays close requisite matters as sexual assault, staff brutality, and the human capacity to survive it has something quite different on its mind. It's consumed by circumstance and life's little ironies, which occur when in prison. The turning point for Andy and his cronies is a bit of conversation captured during a work detail. Aguard bemounts the fact that Uncle Sam will take a healthy bite of a recently deceased relative's legacy. The ex-banker plucks up his courage and tells him how to keep the windfall for a moment. It's like Androclilla's pulling the thorn from the lion's paws. Soon Andy is put to work in all manner of financial activity. He is Warden Norton's Bob Gunton crown jewel and the source of both an enhanced public image for the man and a quietly acquired personal fortune. It's not lost on the convicted murderer that he had to enter prison to learn dishonesty. Gaining a more comfortable life behind bars proves double-edged sword. The warden cannot afford to have Andy paroled. The man knows too much, and he's too valuable in assets. So when the prospect of the truth rears its head, extreme measures come into play. Ultimately, the Shawshank Redemption is about the dominance of real justice. That element of the narrative keeps the movie from descending into abject resignation. Writer-director Frank Darabont adapts his source material with sly acuity. It's a fishly clever construct in which seemingly oblique words or incidents prove to have fierce resonance. Darabont airs only when he digresses too long on a supporting character or embellishes a secondary story. Central to the film's success is a riveting, unfussy performance from Robbins, precise, honest, and seamless. It appears virtually uncalculated. It is the anchor keeping the piece from founding. Freeman has the showier role, allowing him a grace and dignity that come naturally. It's a testament to his craft that the performance is never banal. Supporting work is uniformly strong, with Gunton and Clancy Brown as a vicious guard, extremely credible in their villain tech. Credits are strong, with Roger Deakins' images and Thomas Newman's original score providing just the right balance between the somber and the absurd. Terrence Marsh's sets on an actual prison location capture the mustustiness and permanence of the environment with a plummet statement to the human spirit. The film is a rough diamond. Its languors are small quibbles in an otherwise estimable and haunting entertainment extrain formation. How does a film filled with characters going through existential crises overcome its own to become an enduring classic? When it comes to hailing a movie with that label, much of it is hyperbole. A critic can keep a movie in their readership's minds, but only the audience can preserve a film for generations. That's the miracle of the Shawshank Redemption, whose incredible journey reflects the film's theme of resilience over 3 decades. It began in September 1994 with cheers at the Toronto International Film Festival, but then landed with a thud at the box office. We are talking about a bowling ball falling from the Empire State Building, the kind of thud that would have hit a person which Tom Fontana would call death by Brunswick. Frank Darabont's film, with a hard-to-pronounce name and 2 well-respected leads, made just under $1 million in its limited release on September 23, 1994. The film couldn't crack the top 10, losing to cinema like Jean-Claude Van Damme's Time Copen. And Hilary Swank's pre-award turns the next Karate Kid. Castle Rock invested $25 million in the film and lost over $9 million, not counting advertising and marketing campaigns. Then something happened before the days of digital versatile discs, Blu-ray, and digital streaming. Word of mouth kept the Shawshank Redemption alive. That's the salient point star Morgan Freeman made on the Graham Norton show, the only real Marketing is word of mouth. The Academy Award winner then pointed out audience inability to pronounce the film's title. It's called Shipshank Shank Sham Shock. Millions of people would run clamor and demand that long movie with a funny name and bring home a small plastic box about 7 long, 4 in wide, and 1 in height, weighing just under a pound, that kept safe about 980 feet of non-high-definition magnetic tape. Tim Robbins shares a bit of revisionist this story in an interview with Entertainment Weekly. The immediate reaction at that time wasn't as important as whether the film would have life in video in one cable if you went to your local Blockbuster, Hollywood Video, or mom-and-pop shop you were. Likely turned away or put on a waiting list, like Jamal Wallace waiting for Avalon Landing. The Shawshank Redemption went on to earn $58 million upon awards re-release, becoming the highest video rental of 1995 and generating over $100 million in home entertainment revenue by 2000, only being bested by Titanic, The Lion King, and Star Wars Episode I, The Phantom Menace, not to mention being a mainstay in cable networks like TNT and AMC for years, and proving the film's staying power by sitting on top of IMDb's coveted fan voting, rated as the best film of all time. So how does a movie with little star power, a virtually unknown director, and a dark story about taking place inside ominous walls, with the only hope coming from the eyes of Rita Hayworth? Redemption fed something missing from movies that went beyond the strong silent type, like the autonomy and camaraderie of Cool Hand Luke, the empathy of the Green Mile, and the racial divides of the Defiant Ones. It is the in-ship that those Hollywood starlets hid something else entirely, based on the short story by Stephen King titled Rita Hayworth. And Shawshank Redemption. Tim Robbins plays Andy Dufresne, a man who has just been sentenced to 2 life sentences back-to-back for killing his wife and her lover, who was having an affair with a golf pro. After Dufresne's conviction, Andy is sent to spend the rest of his days at Shawshank State Prison. That's where Morgan Freeman comes in playing. Redman, who knows show to smuggle contraband for the fellas. Red says she's a regular Sears and Roebuck, or by today's standards, an Amazon in Prime. At first, Red and his friends think the former never to fight against their virtues, which taught them the male values of stoicism and self-reliance here. Darabant's masterful adaptation allows the viewer to observe Andy from afar and up close. It's a therapeutic reliance that is built among all three, this being amory play. Freeman's overwhelmingly strong and poetic narration is cathartic, almost taken to a therapist, making observations about a complicated man with walls who is impossible to get to know. Darabant's script is remarkable in that many will fail to convert a short story to the silver screen because the material is stretched beyond its limits. However, the filmmaker takes the horror master's source material and makes its orthoscript's intricate storytelling, uses stramato, explore complex themes like fear, along with an unending existential crisis of suffering, mortality, and the search for meaning. Yet the movie has a violent nature that can turn on a dime, but the narrative is gripping and much more poetic than prosaic would be like. Comparing the visceral Saving Private Ryan to Terrence Malick's lyrical The Thin Red Line, yes, The Shawshank Redemption may lack some grit, but just because it was never Brawlin' Cell Block 99 or HBO's Us doesn't mean it's any less effective. It would argue that this leads to a film with deliberate and entertaining patience regarding symbolism, expression, and meaning. In a now famous line, Andy tells Red that he had to come to prison to be a crook, but as we take in their relationship, we begin to realize these characters need each other to learn humanity as the film progresses. Robbins is able to reveal how Andy slowly chips through those walls she has built around himself at the same time. Freeman illustrates Red's evolution, ultimately discarding the stock responses, becoming more candid and honest, having come to terms with his past, that the label society placed on him. This is the journey Darabont takes the viewer on, and becomes nearly impossible to resist the film's emotional intelligence, old-fashioned Hollywood style, and storytelling classic scenes, a transcendent Thomas Newman score, and cast of eccentric characters. The way Clancy Brown's sadistic prison guard tells Phyllis to drink it while it's cold. Ladies on that prison rooftop, how the film can sharply turn sober, as William Sadler's Haywood reminds Andy of the realities of prison life. You'll be struck at the film's groundwork, laying the tracks for misdirection, as the great James Whitmore, who plays Brooks, carves his name into a boarding house B. Morgan. Freeman's stunning speech solidified his Oscar nomination as she addressed the parole board about the angry young man he once was, and the man he has become. This scene and many others is often regarded as inspirational and admittedly overplayed theme. Yet Freeman's performance in this moment is epic, reflecting a journey that spans decades. It is in self-reflection, growth, and unwavering humility. Yet the Shawshank Redemption is much more than that as a whole. Than some of those gorgeous parts, the film is hardly stuffy and plays like a vintage adaptation of a graphic novel brought to life, characterized by its visual richness, emotional engagement, and multiple narrative layers. Much of the credit for this achievement goes to the great Roger Deakins, whose cinematography showcases his mastery of long takes in the opening prison scene, fluid camera movement during the confrontation on the rooftop, strategic use of lighting for juxtaposition inside the library, and the composition that highlights the lone tree in the middle of a Buckton hayfield that evokes the color of sun-soaked rays. A Sifrid is ascending to a better place, all qualities. The studio crowd leaser that focuses on story instead of overwrought special effects are almost antiquated today. However, it's the story the audience connects with that makes the Shawshank Redemption an enduring classic. Annie and Red's redemption is one of inherent resilience, activated through difficult circumstances that became part of both men's growth through the resilience-building process. King's vision and Darabon's script begin to break down masculine norms by being open to vulnerability and encouraging compassion instead of violent toxicity. That is why the Shawshank Redemption endures. The film spans generations because it speaks to our human capacity for fortitude, adaptation, and the pursuit of connection and purpose. That may be eye-rolling to some and abbot of pie in the sky to many, but it should understandably be encouraged to be reached by all. Warner Brothers gave The Shawshank Redemption a limited theatrical release on September 23, 1994, before going wide on October 14th. It is currently available to buy on Apple TV, Amazon Video. Microsoft Store is download or rented on Apple TV, Amazon Video, Microsoft Store. Spectrum On Demand online on September 23, 1994, after a premiere at the Toronto Film Fest. The Shawshank Redemption hit theaters nationwide. The Morgan, Freeman, and Tim Robbins film eventually nabbed 7 Oscar nominations. The Hollywood Reporter's original review is below. Castle Rock has tapped into the wellspring of yet another Stephen King novella from the same collection as Stand By Me. While it seems unlikely that this well-wrought film about hope and friendship in a maximum security prison will stand by male-level business, The Shawshank Redemption should appeal to a mature audience. The marketing challenge will be to lure a mainstream audience to this dark drama starring Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman, with to boot enigmatic title-related stories covering a span of time from 1946 to 1967. Shawshank focuses on the plight of a Maine banker, Andy Dufresne Robbins, sentenced to 2 life terms for the murder of his wife and lover laconic and habitually. Andy is somewhat of an outcast among the uneducated macho thugs who make up the main brunt of the prison population. Admittedly, he's not an easy guy to get to know and only comes to enjoy a prison friendship when he makes a deal with the prison black market supplier Red Freeman to get them Atney Hammer for his rock collection. Red is also an enigma to most of the inmates. He keeps his nose clean and his hopes up, even though the parole board routinely denies him pardon, obviously a racial antagonism, while the story roils with some rousing prison-type action and is coarsened by an overpowering sense of frustration. The Shawshank Redemption is really about the unlikely friendship between Andy and Red. Each nurtures the other and serves as a touchstone for keeping their sanity intact. Frank Darabon's writing and direction are generally crisp, but Shawshank is a tough watch, and audiences could use some time cut from its 142 minutes. In the lead roles, both Robbins and Freeman are outstanding. Layering their sustenances and minor triumphs are wonderfully inspiring. Technical contributions are well crafted, particularly cinematographer Roger Deakins' forbidding lensing, filmed in a garrison-like former prison in Mansfield, Ohio. Shawshank is often overwhelming in its depiction of the granite, cold, stony horror of prison life. Most splendid is Thomas Newman's somber score, which at its best moments alights with radiant textures and spritly grace notes nicely. Emblematic of the film's central theme. Dwayne Burge, this film directed by Frank Darabont. Screenplay by Frank Darabont. Produced by Nicky Marvin, starring Tim Robbins, Morgan Freeman, Bob Gunton, William Sadler, Clancy Brown, Gobellis, James Whitmore. Cinematography, Roger. Music by Thomas Newman. Production company, Castle Rock Entertainment. Distributed by Columbia Pictures. Release dates: September 10th, 1994, September 23rd, 1994 in United States. Running time, 142 minutes. Country, United States. Language, English. Budget, $25 million. Box office, $73.3 million. So guys, this is the review of the Shawshank Redemption movie and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting. And if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.